Hey guys, Jeremy here with Simple Little Life. Welcome to part number 3 of the rock pattern Chunky Monkey build series. In this video, we are going to attach the handle scales. I'll show you how I lay out and drill my holes. Let's get started. So I went ahead and just taped up the bevel to protect it, and we're going to be using Corby bolts. Essentially a Corby bolt, it's kind of like a fastener. So we've got shoulders on each side, and that's going to be, we're going to have like a counter bore that we're going to squeeze against. And then the clamping force, which is not a lot of clamping force, but that's going to come from the threaded part. So one part's got a female thread. This diameter right here is what we drilled the holes through. In this case, it's 1/8 of an inch. And then we've got this other, the male end of it, and that's going to thread into there, clamp this whole thing down. And we've got these little slots right here for a screwdriver, a flat blade screwdriver. Once we start grinding down, we want to get rid of that so it looks like a solid pin. I'm just going to kind of lay out my blocks like this, put the knife on it, and just figure roughly where I want this going. One thing I always like to make sure is that I've got enough. Our handle scales are going to come something like this. And so I want to make sure I've got enough room and I've got plenty on this block here. What I'll do is I'll set this up here and use these can't twist clamps. I've got a whole Tool Time Tuesday on these. When using these clamps, you do want to make sure that you have clearance for your drilled holes. So I always like to put the fat part of the clamp on the top where I'm going to be drilling through. You see these clamps, one of these pads is smaller than the other one. So I always put the fat one on top. That way I can see, yes, I've got room to drill here, here, and I'll put the next one over here. Well, these ones actually, you know what? I need the bigger ones. Don't quite have enough reach. Looks good to me. Tighten that sucker up. Nice and flat, even. Tighten this one up. And we are ready to drill. So we'll go ahead and do a 1/8 inch hole for these. Then once we're done that, we're going to come back and counter bore for the thicker part to fit through. And then we're going to go ahead and mark out this hole and drill that. This is the one I'm a little bit concerned about because it's a 1/2 inch, you know, bigger drill bits. They tend to, sometimes they don't drill really smooth, but if we take it nice and easy, nice and slow, we should be good. What I'll do is I'll put 1, 2, 3 blocks on my drill press, which are these guys right here. Boom and boom, probably like this. Actually, maybe we'll do it this way. The reason for that is they'll keep the surface nice and parallel, but it gives us the clearance we need for these can't twist clamp. We'll chuck up our 1/8 of an inch drill bit, drill these, and then we'll do it the same thing with a 1/2 inch. Next part, going to just trace the outline here, and then we're going to cut these scales closer to size. And then what I'm going to do right here is give myself roughly where I want that curve to start and stop. I'm going to draw it just loosely as a reference once we take the knife off. So we've got that all laid out. I'll give the old one of these just as a future reference. This can certainly change, but I have an idea now. So I'll actually lay this side in here. Slap a couple of these suckers in here and do the exact same thing to the other side. And at this point, what I like to do is just to keep everything all lined up as we go. This will be the right side if I'm holding this, right side, left side. So on the inside of the handle scale, I just put an R. And then on the inside of this one, I'll put an L. That way I know which is the inside, outside, right side, left side. Yippee dippy doo. Let's cut these suckers out. Next step of the process here, I need to figure out roughly how deep to counter bore these holes, boom, 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 so that this sucker can get buried in there. And what I like to do is just kind of put the scales on either side of the blade. Right now, this whole thing sitting up here is like almost 1.25 inches. So it's pretty darn thick. So what I'm gonna do, I'm happy enough, I've got about 4 or 5 threads engaged. And the key thing with these Corby bolts that you need to consider is that these are not, they're not designed to actually fasten the scales. I mean, they do slightly suck it up, but I still use clamps when I'm clamping this together. And ultimately, this is such a fine thread. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's probably like a number 6, maybe a number 4. And if you were to just go ahead and hog on this thing, they're just gonna break off. They're not gonna clamp. They give the slightest little bit of pressure, and you definitely wanna tighten them up so that they're not loose or anything. But you don't wanna consider these something like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like hog these things down and bolt the scales on. It's not the case. So I'd say get about 4 or 5 threads engaged. Most of the fastening on a bolt and nut is done within the first 3 threads. The rest of them are, they do carry some of the load, but the most of the load is carried in the first 3 threads. And that's true for all threaded fasteners. Some of the engineering we had to take with learning about that stuff, I guess, they thought we needed to know. So I'm just gonna take the old pencil and kind of figure roughly right here. I wanna bring it down to there and about down to there. So now what I can do is I will measure this diameter of the outside of the barrel here. I always make sure this is zeroed. So we're 1.875, so that's what, that's 3/16? Yeah, 3/16 of an inch. So I need to get a 3/16 inch drill bit, and I'm gonna kinda set my depth stop to the point that we just marked out there, and that's gonna be how deep I'm gonna drill this. If I do that, I should definitely be able to get this a place where this can bite onto, come through the tang and grab the other side and have about 4 or 5 threads engaged. So that's kind of the key thing. They do sell drill bits, stepped drill bits that have this part already in it, so it's like a one-time deal. I find it's just as easy for me just to drill these out separately. You want to make sure your drill press is nice and square. You don't want to have these holes coming in at an angle, otherwise you'll have, you know, your holes will be kind of oblonged or something, or your fastener will be in there and there'll be a little spot where there's no wood and it just doesn't look that great. So just take your time with this and it works pretty good. Alright, so what I'm actually going to do now is I've got an end mill, typically they're for a milling machine, but they work really good in this application. I've got my hole started, but now I can come and counterbore to the bottom, and that's going to give me a really nice flat surface and, you know, maximum contact with that Corby bolt. So one thing to consider, even if you don't have a milling machine, these end mills, they're really inexpensive and they can be quite handy even just used in your drill press. Alright, so we've got a pretty good fit in there. You see how we just barely buried those under the surface. That's totally fine. I just tested out with 2 of them and our depths are good. So now I'm just going to lay out the pin length that we need. We'll cut this down and then we'll grind up the ends and make sure that's going to fit in nicely here as well. Alright, so we've got these smoothed over. They're looking pretty good. They're at like 320 grit. I'm going to go over them by hand a little bit. But the next thing I need to do is I like to put in a 45-degree angle right here. And that obviously is a lot easier to do before you glue your scales on. So one thing I like to do is just super easy, is I just take a piece of pencil. This one here, I'm getting my money's worth out of it. But just set it down like this. Keep it on a flat of the pencil. And I can just come in here and slide this along my granite surface plate or whatever flat surface you have, and what that does, it gives me a little line to grind to. And again, I've got this thing shimmed up with a ruler right now. If you wanted it closer to the actual knife, I could just set this down. Make sure that you're using the inside down on the block. Do the other side. There you go, boom. Now I've got a nice visual to grind to, and I'll get nice even concentric 45 degrees. I'll show you the 45 block that I have made up, but that'll give me enough space. And again, if I grind it and I kind of hold it up and I'm like, oh, that's a little bit too much, I can always just go without the ruler or shim it differently with something thinner, and then make a line closer and then come and bring that closer. So put my work rest like this, tighten it up. And then what I have here, super high-tech piece of kit. This is a piece of maple that I cut at 45 degrees. I screwed the bottom to a piece of tin, and basically I just clamp that onto there. I'll actually put a clamp right here and here, and then I can come in, make sure again, working on the outside, so I'm checking, I want the inside notation up facing me when I do this. I can just kind of come in like this, and boom, I'll grind a consistent 45 degree bevel right there. Both sides, we're done. What I've gone ahead and done is I've put in all the screws, put in the lanyard tube just to make sure it's all going to bolt up properly, and it does. So I'm just going to do some rough shaping on this, kind of bring it a little bit closer to the final profile. I'm not going to worry about getting real tight. This is an 80 grit belt, so we're just going to go profile on this side, and then I'll put in my small wheels and we'll profile the other side. That way we've got very little material to grind down after glue up. Okay, so we've got everything roughly fit up here, and I think it's going to go together quite smoothly. Having said that, there is a lot of assembly required, and typically I use a 5-minute epoxy, but with something like this, I've got 4 Corby bolts, I've got this pin to shove in there. It requires a little bit more time sometimes than just 5 minutes, so I'm actually going to use the West Systems. I've got the 105 epoxy resin, the 205 fast hardener. Now they say fast hardener, it's not that fast. It's a lot slower than a 5-minute epoxy. I think working time with this is about, I don't know, you have at least like a half an hour with this stuff before it starts to thicken up. So I think that's going to be a lot better. It gives me time to put everything together, adjust everything as I need, get all these tightened down properly, and all it means is I just have to let it cure for a little bit longer before we start grinding it. So
And again, we're not tightening too hard on this, we're just snugging them up a bit. Definitely not cranking down on them though. Alright, so we've got that glued together. Now I'm gonna clean all the mess up, and then we'll wipe out all the squeeze out, make sure it all dries up nice and clean.